Hey everyone, it is about 12:48 p.m. Pacific time on this Thursday, October 30th. Yes, we are one day away from Halloween. October 30th, 2025. It is 73 degrees outside and it's nice and sunny. Now, before I start this audio video, I would like to ask you, if you can, to do me a solid favor, and that's like the video, ring the bell for notification, subscribe to the channel, and share the video. Also, if you would like, there are links in the description to find my content elsewhere outside of YouTube. If you are into listening to podcasts on the road, at home, at work, you name it, basically whatever your I guess you could say favorite podcast service, or favorite service, I should say, to use to listen to podcasts, you'll more than likely find mine there, because you can find my podcast at iTunes, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Radio Public, Spotify, Audible, Amazon Music, and to an extent SiriusXM. Basically, wherever there is a podcast, you will find mine there. You can also support me over at video outlets. That's what I was trying to say. You can support me over at video outlets like Rumble.com and VENMO.com. Rumble and VENMO basically have similar, if not identical, content that you see here on my main YouTube channel, but there are a few differences, and those differences are due to the fact that some of the content there may not be suitable for YouTube, but it is passable there. So go and support me at Rumble.com and VENMO.com, along with Dailymotion and Odyssey, where you'll find content from me there as well. Also, if you're into art, you can find me at DeviantArt.com at BVW1979 and InkBunny.net at BWRoses. Also, I have a Patreon. If you want to go to Patreon, I am there. Check me out at Patreon. I do have plans for that in the near future, and what those will be, I will let you know. Also, ladies and gentlemen, you can follow me over at x.com, aka Twitter, and Blue Sky. I have accounts there that you want to follow. I am there. Also, I am on TikTok. You can find me on TikTok if you're interested in that. I have some things up there on TikTok. I might look into it in the future to do more, but I am on TikTok if you're into that. Also, ladies and gentlemen, along with all that, you can find me at various other areas. I have I have two stores. One is my newest one, the Fourth Wall store. You can find me there. I have one bit of items there, but there will be more to come in the future. I'm just kind of letting it kind of gradually ease into existence. I don't want no issues, like what I had at the beginning with the other store I have, and the links are at the bottom for that, and that is the Teespring store. Basically, at the Teespring store, which has been around for years now, you can find merchandise you can't get anywhere else. But like I said, the reason I bring it up is because when I started it, I had some issues, but over time, it's kind of gradually smoothed out over time. And basically, that's kind of why I only have one bit of item at the Fourth Wall store, which again, the link for that, is at the top. Also, ladies and gentlemen, you can also support me through the live chat, if you will. Live chat will be open during this video premiere, and because it'll be open, SuperChats will also be open. So if you want to come on in and donate there, if you can, it'd be greatly appreciated. Now, if you can't make it in time for the video premiere, and I'm talking to you guys that are listening afterwards, if you can't, and understandably make it in time for the video premiere, but you're listening afterwards, and you want to help donate, the Super Thanks button will be open as well. And during both occasions, the video premiere and afterwards, comments will be welcome in the comment section. But with that said, let's get into the topic at hand here. Alright, so recently Warner Brothers, through the Warner Archive, re-released a cult classic just in time for Halloween. Now, last year they released it on Blu-ray for the first time, but they released it in a double pack. And what I mean by a double pack, I'm basically meaning two movies on one Blu-ray disc. Now, according to some people that have talked about the recent release, as well as the previous one, there are some issues. Basically, like there's a glitch or so within one of the movies, the first initial movie, if you will, um, because of the doubling up, I should say, on the Blu-ray disc. And apparently the reason for that glitch, according to one person on YouTube, that being Scooby-Pedia, believe it or not, they basically said that the reason for that glitch is due to the fact that instead of using a BD50 Blu-ray recordable disc, if you will, or disc period to put the movies on there, then instead of doing that, they instead opted for a BD25, which can hold two movies, but there will be issues. There will be glitchy issues, or the resolution or the picture and all that. Something will become askew. Something will become askew, if you will. Well, they basically said that with this re-release this year on Blu-ray as a collector's edition, that unfortunately that glitch did not get fixed. That glitch did not get fixed, and thus, people just have to deal with it. Now it's not a big deal, but it's just very noticeable when it happens. It's just noticeable when it happens. That and when I hear that, honestly, it's not, to me. When I hear that, I don't have a problem with it. I don't have a problem with it, period, because of the fact that a lot of us that have been watching this movie for years, we all own, in some capacity, a different formatted version of this film. We all have some kind of different formatted version of this film in some capacity, to where, having the collector's edition is going to be great. It's going to be tremendous and everything, because, as far as we know, the way people have been making it sound, Warner's is not the Warner Archive. Warner Archive, basically, they are not the kind that actually back down, from what they do. They're kind of like, hey, we're going to do this, whether you like it or not, and that's it. That's final. They usually don't kind of rescind. They don't kind of retract and be like, hey, people are speaking with the wallets, let's fix this, and they end up doing so. Then they don't usually do that. They usually try to stick to their guns. And here they did kind of listen to the fans, but they didn't do like a full restoration, a full fixing, if you will, of the film. I mean, the restoration's still there. It's probably a bit better, but they didn't do like a full, fixing of the film, like I mentioned earlier, the glitch situation and all that. But they obviously listened to the fans enough to where they did what they had to. They did what they had to get this film out on its own and basically make it a lot better in presentation. Now, I don't have the collector's edition yet. From what I understand, it is heading my way. When and where it will show up, well, that's when I'll do a package opening. That's when I'll do a package opening, and you'll see it for the first time. But again, I know it's heading my way. I just don't know when or where. But like I said, when it does show up, that's when the package opening, that'll be the day the package opening occurs for it. And hopefully it'll be soon. But I can't say, like I said, I can't say where or when. I'll put it that way. But, of course, what I'm talking about is the 1998 cult animated classic that basically revitalized the Scooby-Doo franchise for a new generation, and that is Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. And I can tell you honestly, when I first heard about this, basically I had just graduated. I think they started advertising it just around the time I was graduating out of high school. Yeah, it's been that long. 27 years. 27 years actually last month. Last month, September 22nd, was the 27th anniversary of this film, believe it or not. And this film, really just, like I said, it put Scooby-Doo back on the map. It really, just not only reintroduced who the characters were to the original fans that grew up with them, that grew up with them basically, you know, from the late '60s, the '70s, the '80s, and all that. It just it just didn't reintroduce the characters to them, but it actually grew the characters. It actually moved. It basically grew the characters up, if you will, to a point that usually when characters get aged up, sometimes it's impressive. People are always like kind of surprised, like, oh, that's kind of cool that they did that. It's shows us where they are, as they got older, or what they've become, and da da da. But also other times people are like, I'm not too fond of this. I don't like them aging up the characters. They should have just kept it the way it was, and da da da. People will be mixed about it. There's no doubt. Like they'll understand the reason, but they'll just not like it. But then again, some will understand the reason and they'll love it. And this is one of the cases of option B, or the earlier reason. People saw the characters kind of aged up a little bit older, and people loved it. People accepted it. It was kind of cool to see. It was kind of cool to see because here's the thing: they didn't age him up too much, but if we were to make an assumption in that continuity at the time, basically the assumption would be the characters got aged up by at least, I would say, 5 years, 4 or 5 years maybe, and that's it. Not that big of a time gap, if you will. So basically, almost like half a decade. They got aged up by. But what people also liked about this film too was the animation. I mean, usually in the past when we've had Scooby-Doo movies, direct-to-video or direct-to-television movies and all that, or specials, the animation's decent or sometimes subpar. This felt like basically they wanted to, with all intentions, from what I can tell, this felt like they wanted to put it on the big screen, and I think that was the original intention. I think the original intention by Warner Brothers at that time was to put this on the big screen and see if maybe that might, and see maybe if perhaps people will be interested, in a revitalization of Scooby. That was probably, in my opinion, one of the initial ideas when they came up with this, to put it on the big screen. But I'm guessing somebody stepped in and said, nope, that's not going to work. Let's put it on VHS instead. And this again, not again, but I'm always saying that because I don't know why I always say this again, because I think the reason I do that in my videos is because I think I mention it, but then I realize I don't. So it's just a habit. It's just a habit, and I'm sure a lot of you kind of do something similar. I think no. As a matter of fact, I know some of you probably do something similar because I've seen it in videos here on YouTube. But anyway, to get to the point, to get back on track. Basically, like I said, I think the initial idea was for them to put this on the big screen, but someone stepped in and said, no, that's not going to work, and decided that the better option was to put it on VHS. Now, this was at a time, that's what I was trying to say, this was at a time when DVD was just starting out. DVD was kind of like what Blu-ray and then later 4K became. It was basically starting out in a way to where basically you had to make just a little above normal income sometimes to afford a DVD player and over time afford to build a DVD collection. That's when this movie was being released. At that time frame, to where that was just a new format, and basically VHS was still the prominent format. And that's how they advertised the debut of this film. They advertised it as coming to VHS. That's what they did. They advertised it as coming to VHS and not DVD, because like I said, DVD was just a new format, slowly starting out, and starting to make its presence known little by little. And VHS was still dominating the market. So basically, in my opinion, what I think happened is they had the intentions to put it on the big screen, but someone stepped in and said, no, that's not a good idea. We're not going to get a financial return. Let's put it on VHS instead and go from there. That's probably our best option. And, well, whoever And well, whoever came up with the ideas, I'm trying to find the right word to say here, whoever came up with that decision, fortunately made the right decision. Now, I'm not saying that if they would not, I'm not saying that, if they would have put it on the big screen and put it in theaters, maybe even for a limited time, I'm not saying it wouldn't have done bad or good. It might have been mediocre, but as far as like a box office success goes. But obviously, the person that probably stepped in and kind of nixed that, basically nixed that idea. I'm trying to find the right word to say. You kind of nixed that idea. Whoever came up with that decision, if that happened, again, this mere speculation and opinion on my part, because again, when you look at the animation, you almost feel like this was meant. You almost have this belief that it was meant for the big screen and not direct to home market. But again, whoever nixed the idea, if that did happen, made the right choice, in my opinion. But yeah, the animation is one of those standout things about the movie that a lot of people like. It's one of the standout things about the movie people like because when you look at this movie, when you look at the movie and everything, again, the animation, basically makes the other animations they used for the previous direct-to-video movies or direct-to-television movies from Scooby-Doo, the movies and specials, it basically makes them look, pale in comparison. Basically, like, they're not even worthy of being in its presence, if you know what I mean. And I mean, basically, if you really want to get down to it, if you're an animation historian or an animation enthusiast, if you really want to, get to the nitty gritty and nitpick about it, the animation had more of an anime feel. This and The Witch's Ghost, which was the somewhat follow-up to Zombie Island, they had that anime aesthetic to it, which was kind of cool. That was kind of cool to see. And a lot of people will say, "Oh, certain movies in the '80s and the '90s were their introduction to anime." I guarantee you, people will say the same thing about Zombie Island because it had that feeling, it had that style in its animation quality. I mean, from the facial reactions and all that, from the zombies design and everything, the scares, it's just it just felt like it just felt like it was an anime meant for the Western audiences. Kind of like what people say Transformers the movie in '86 was. It was an anime meant for the Western audiences, and it was the Western audiences' introduction to anime, which again, I'm assuming some would say the same thing about Zombie Island. You know, but yeah, this film was just tremendous. It was just tremendous, and I remember when it came out, I wanted to get it. I told my father I want to get this film. I want to get this film, and he agreed. He said, "Yeah, we'll get it for you. We'll get it for you." And it was basically for me. It was basically for me like a belated birthday, belated graduation gift is what it was. It was belated birthday and graduation gift when I got it. Now, I think also at that time, I think also at that time, I was kind of part of a program, second year in a row, that I was part of this program where I would, spend a week living in a kind of like an apartment dorm-like environment in Topeka, Kansas, and I would have, a job, on the side. And the job I had on the side to kind of get me ready to step into the real world, which it did help me out, was I worked at Washburn University in the kitchen, kind of cleaning things up and all that, like cleaning dishes and all that. So I worked there, and basically I had money coming in. I had some money coming in, but it wasn't enough it wasn't enough going into September, if you know what I mean. I didn't have a bank account at that time. Believe it or not, I didn't. So most of that money went to my father's account. So he helped me out, and that's how, like I said, I got my hands on the VHS of Zombie Island, which I still have to this day. I have that original plastic shell that the movie came in. It wasn't a slipcover, it wasn't a box, it wasn't a slipcover box or anything like that. It wasn't, a hard clam and all that. It was basically it was basically, like I said, a plastic clam shell. Well, yeah, it was plastic. What I'm trying to say, is it was basically one of those covers that you normally would see like with Disney or even Universal, that later on. It was very like, open it up, there's a movie, there you go. Basically, it's the white plastic cover, and everything. Not the ones they would use later on, like, Kid Rhino did for Transformers movie release. It's not that cover. It was the plastic cover. It was the white plastic, Disney-esque cover, if you know what I mean. Or box, clamshell, whatever. But yeah, I remember getting it and just watching it for the first time and watching it again and again and again because I thought it was so good. It was so good. And I have a variety DVD that when I moved out on my own a few years later, not only did I get myself a DVD player, but I also got myself, and I had a VHS player. So I had a DVD, VHS as well, both, individually, not together, but individually. But then later on, because I was working, I ended up buying myself a DVD recorder, which was, I think, the Apex recorder. I think it was the Apex, and of course, I've talked about that before, where I had to go through 3 of them before one actually worked for a bit. And then I got the the ILO recorder, and that lasted me until I got out here, believe it or not. But basically, what I did with some of them, like with the ILO, is I would record variety DVDs, not just for shows, but with movies and stuff. And one of them, I decided to put Zombie Island on. In fact, Zombie Island was like the first one I put on there, because it was that good, because I liked it that much, I enjoyed it that much. But it was, but here's the thing, it was because of Zombie Island that not only did I get back into back into Scooby-Doo, and I always was into Scooby-Doo, don't get me wrong, but, this was one of those situations where I was one of those one of those people. I was not even, here's the thing, you want to know how old I was when this movie came out? Huh? You want to know how old I was? I was 19. 19 years old when this movie came out. And you would think a 19-year-old and excited about a Scooby-Doo movie? Yeah, especially with the way they promoted the dang thing. Of course, it's going to get my attention and anybody else's attention at that age, maybe even older. So yeah, I wanted it. I wanted to get the movie, and I did. And then, like I said later on, when I was using my ILO recorder, I ended up recording it onto a DVD along with some other stuff because I enjoyed it that much. In fact, it's on a variety DVD where I also have Tiny Toons and How I Spent My Vacation on. And I have that original VHS as well still, believe it or not. But yeah, it's just, I love this movie so much too. Like I said, it allowed me to not only get back into Scooby, because like I was saying, I never got out of it. It's just that, when you're going to school and all, playing football and all that, you don't really think about cartoons that much. I mean, I still loved cartoons. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I would still wake up on Saturday mornings, try to watch them even though I'd be tired. Like I said in my like I was kind of referencing to, after playing football the previous night, or at least participating in it the previous night on Friday for my high school. I'd be tired, but I would basically get myself up. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to get the right word to say. I would basically get myself up to watch cartoons that Saturday morning, if I had the opportunity to, because, long story short, the living arrangements were basically to a point to where I had the whole upstairs to myself, both rooms, and my father had the living room. We'll put it that way. But yeah, to get to the point, I would get myself up, even when I was tired from the previous night, to watch Saturday morning still. That's what I'm trying to say. I would get myself up. That's what I would do. And basically, when I lived on my own, as I mentioned, I started to really, get back into a lot of the fandoms I had as a kid and everything. Again, never left them. Like Scooby-Doo, I never left it. It's just, again, a lot of things, took precedent over stuff like that. And it took, advertisements and promotions like what Warner Brothers did for Zombie Island, to get my attention, to want to see this movie and get it. And I did. I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to get this film. End of story. I'm going to get this film, and I did. And, here's what's interesting. It got me to, collect all the other releases that came afterwards, if you will. It got me to collect Witch's Ghost. It got me to collect Cyber World. It got me to, not Cyber World, Cyber Chase. It got me to collect Alien Invasion. I think that's the one. And, and so on and so forth. It's basically anytime there was a new Scooby movie coming out, a direct-to-video, I would buy it. I would try to get it on basically DVD at that time, and then later on Blu-ray. I would try my best, and then thanks to people like Frank Hill, it's Frank, I'm able to obtain, those movies a lot, a little easier, because they are very understanding that, people like myself and Zara Nizarak and all that, the people they send stuff to for their enjoyment, basically they understand, hey, they basically understand, hey, I get it, you can't, you can't afford, much and all that, so let me help you out. And they do so when they can, when they themselves can. And I thank God for people like Frank Hill and others like him, with the, for them doing that. I thank God for them doing that, if you will. But anyway, to get to the point though, this movie not only got me back full time into being a Scooby fan, but it got me excited for what was to come. And of course, what came literally 4 years later was the live action film, which I saw in theaters. And then, of course, 2 years later, I saw the sequel in theaters, And basically, it just, like I said, continued the trend for me being a fan and all that. And I did get some figures as well on my own. I got, those Scooby-Doo figures that would have the monster and one of the Mystery Inc. gangs in it. Well, I got two of them on my own when I worked at Walmart. And one of them was Daphne, and the other was Velma. So yeah, I got those two, and then packed away somewhere in the garage in one of the totes, I have a Daphne plush. Believe it or not, yes, I have a Daphne plush. So, and then I have like a little Scooby figure, I think, up in the closet or something. And of course I have like Scooby-Doo t-shirts and everything. So yeah, and Scooby-Doo comics as well, because I ended up getting those too. Frank Hill actually sent me some of those Scooby-Doo comics, and I appreciate him for doing that. Really, really appreciate him for doing that. And yeah, it's just this movie. It shows you the impact this movie had on fans like me. Because again, we fans never forgot our love for characters like Scooby-Doo or the Mystery Inc. gang, but because it was kind of stagnant, because not much was happening at that time, we just put it to the side. We put it to that side to where we needed something to remind us, hey, it's still around. It's not gone. Because it easily could have been one of those Hanna-Barbera properties that Warner Brothers, if they wanted to, they could have, axed into extinction. And thank God they never did that with any of them. Thank God they never did that with any of them. But it could have been one of those that they could have axed into extinction, but they didn't. They didn't. And, and thank God for that, because, someone decided to come up with this idea, and the rest is history. And you know why they came up with this idea? You know why they came up with this idea? Because depending on how you look at it, it was being released just in time to celebrate the 30th anniversary. That's right. That's right. The 30th anniversary, around 1998, 1999, was when Scooby-Doo, was celebrating 30 years. Because they were created in 1968-69, so the timing for release on Zombie Island was perfect. Now you might say, well, couldn't they have done that for the 25th? That would have been more better. Yeah, they could have, but I think a lot of these companies, they like to wait till you get that, they like to wait, they like to wait till you get to that decade anniversary before they decide, hey, let's do something special for such and such franchise or such and such movie. Let's do something special for it because it's going on 40 years, 50 years, 70 years, 30 years, since its release. Let's do something special. And that's why they did Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. That's why they did it. They did it to celebrate 30 years, bring the characters back to the forefront, and basically let people know, hey, we got plans that we think you're going to love. And boy, did we ever. Boy, did we ever. I can tell you that honestly. But yeah, honestly, I was just, I was just happy to get this movie when it came out, and I've enjoyed it ever since. And I know when I get the Terror Time edition, when it comes to my house, whenever that's going to be, after I do the package opening and all that, I will be watching that as well. Again, glitch or no glitch. So anyway, I'm just, wanted to come on here in time for Halloween because Halloween is tomorrow, basically. I just wanted to come on here and talk about, Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, celebrating, believe it or not, it may not be a big deal, but celebrating 27 years. So, yeah, it's hard to believe because, what's funny is its 30th anniversary will be in 2028. And I say that because, as I just mentioned, I'm trying to find the right word to say, the movie itself was created to celebrate Scooby's 30th anniversary. In about 3 years, we'll be celebrating its 30th anniversary. So hard to believe. But, yeah, again, this is what got me back into fully being a fan again of Scooby. Again, never left being a fan, but still kind of one of those situations. I'm sure you understand what I mean. But yeah, it got me back into being a Scooby fan and just, loving everything about the franchise and the characters. And it's also what got me into basically talking about which is obvious to a lot of fans. And I was surprised by the fact that I'm not alone in this. I'm not alone, in the fact that, when I look at, the Scooby-Doo, the all-new Scooby-Doo Scrappy-Doo show, and then the follow-up season called New Scooby-Doo Mysteries, and then 13 Ghosts, and then even everything that comes out in between, as a lot of people pointed out, along myself. This return full time to being a fan, if you will, is what got me into talking about the Shaggy Daphne situation. Because again, not to go off topic, but as I've mentioned before numerous of times, when you go and look at those other shows I just mentioned, as well as you look at some of the direct-to-video movies that have come out, recently in the past decade or so, it's like, come on, how many instances do you have that pretty much are not hinting at the idea that these two could be together? I mean, even though Zombie Island pretty much tried to put a nail in that coffin and say, nope, not going to happen. Well, guess what? Fans, obviously, probably more so than I think Warner Brothers and the animation division would expect. Fans are letting it be known that, yeah, you can try to put a nail in that coffin, but guess what? We're going to bust that coffin right open and resurrect that ship and show you exactly why, you should at least try it out or test it out in the near future. But, yeah, honestly, can't say any more than what I have, and can't wait to get the collector's edition when I do. And that's all I can say. That's all I can say on it, guys. But let me know what your fond memories are on Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. How did it get you back into the fandom? Did it get you back to talking about, the Shaggy and Daphne ship? Did it get you into collecting a lot of the other Scooby movies that came afterwards and all that? Let me know what your thoughts are. How did you feel about it when it first came out? Did it kind of make you a fan of anime because of its similarity in animation style to it? Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And until next time, guys, as I said at the beginning, like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, share the video, and click on the link in the description to find my content elsewhere outside of YouTube, as well as to support me in other places outside of YouTube as well. And super thanks. We'll be open in just a minute, or just in a few moments. If you didn't get to be part of the live chat, you can donate that way, as well as you can comment down below in the comments. But until next time, guys, let me know what your thoughts are. And until then, I'm out.